Hello, today is Friday, October 17th, and welcome to episode 515 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, and I'm joined today by Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, fellow Jessica Jones, and visiting fellow Algene Sadri. As the war in Ukraine grinds on, we are seeing a moment of diplomatic recalibration. Again, shaped directly by U.S. power and presidential personality, perhaps. President Trump, fresh off a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, is now turning his full attention back to the war being waged by Russia on Ukraine. Trump is hosting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House today, even as he also plans a separate meeting with Vladimir Putin to be held in Budapest within the coming weeks. So this sequencing is, I assume, intentional and also risky. Trump calls his approach deal-making diplomacy, using the possible transfer of Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine as both a carrot and a stick. Those missiles are capable of striking well within Russia and could transform Kyiv's long-range strike capacity and certainly raise Moscow's military costs dramatically. So after a 2-hour call with Putin, Trump appeared hesitant about these missiles, saying that the United States cannot deplete its own stockpile. But he also insists that he can finalize this war and bring about peace. Obviously, Zelensky is pressing for less negotiation and more firepower. He, argues that strength creates momentum for peace. Obviously, Putin did raise concern about the Tomahawk missiles, and it seems that has pushed Putin toward more meetings and talks. I would like to go to you first, Jessica. We've been talking a lot about the situation in the Middle East of late. Obviously, Trump is fresh off of negotiating this peace deal between Israel and Hamas. Are there any lessons from that situation that could be applied to Russia and Ukraine?
I mean, it's clear timing wise, President Trump is trying to take the momentum from the success, in particular phase one of the Gaza peace deal, to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Fortunately, his momentum is running into the Russian wall, right? The Russian-Ukraine conflict is very much different than what happened, between Hamas and Israel. Russia is a nuclear power. It is a historic, ancient nation state. You've got Vladimir Putin, who's been in power for decades, who is this KGB extraordinaire that, books have been written about. He's been studied. They continue to have partners giving them economic lifelines, purchasing their gas, India, China, that we don't seem to have as much leverage over as we seem to think we do. Stories indicate, I think President Trump announced that India was ceasing purchasing Russian energy. That seems to have been walked back. So we're in a completely different state when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And as well, but we do have a little bit of the same, it's great that President Zelensky is coming to the Oval Office to talk Tomahawk missiles, but it seems as if even the Ukrainian leadership was surprised that President Trump, before that, got on the phone with Putin, seemingly walked back the Tomahawk missiles, and all of a sudden there's a summit number 2 happening in a few weeks in Budapest. That was news to the Ukrainian team. And so the question remains, what is actually the leverage the U.S. has to bring about the end of this conflict? What really are there capabilities the U.S. can provide? If it's not the Tomahawks, what is it to change Putin's calculus? We do have the EU deciding, looming on whether they're going to unlock $100 billion of frozen Russian assets that would help fund the Ukrainian support, weapons, what have you, which is a big deal. That's a lot of money that could go towards arms and weapons. But right now, whether the summit in the future changes, whether the meeting today in the White House changes anything, whether the summit, I'm afraid it looks like the same summit we had in Alaska in August. And so I'm a little worried that the momentum that the White House hopes that they can really force, change in this conflict, it's running into Putin.
So, Algene, Jessica mentioned the assets, the Russian assets, and possible EU action with regard to that. How is Russia doing economically? Is that the lever that could be used to bring Putin to heel? Do we have some ways to persuade on the economic front?
Yeah, well, first I want to just make a point, just to piggyback off of what Jess said. When President Trump announced his willingness to move forward with Tomahawks, with the sale of Tomahawks to Ukraine, one thing I found very interesting during the press conference is that he mentioned how the U.S. needs Tomahawks as well. So it seemed to be, as Jess was saying, somewhat of a waffling of his position on Tomahawks because, why would you mention that we need them? Of course we need them. That's why we have them. Why would you mention that we need them while you're talking about the sale to Ukraine? First of all, I just want to get that in. And then on the economic piece, I worked on the Global Magnitsky Act and the Russia-specific Magnitsky Act for Ben Cardin, who is a Democrat, passed it through the Senate and through the full House as well, while President Obama at the time very much opposed increased sanctions on Russia. And we have right now a bill in the Senate that's been languishing 4 months that has 84 co-sponsors, well above a veto-proof number of co-sponsors. And yet the Senate hasn't moved because Trump keeps vacillating on his position on increased sanctions. And I think that's really going to be where the rubber meets the road. That's where, Putin's going to pay more attention to it. Not only that bill that not only imposes stricter sanctions on Russia, but also on its trading partners, to get at what Jess was saying around India. And so it would be a huge deterrent and would hopefully bring Putin to the negotiating table in a real honest, earnest way, we think. Right. And so I think that we have the tools, we have the means to really have a strong deterrent through crippling sanctions that would really impact Russia's ability to fund its war. But we're not using that, and that is problematic.
So, Lester, I'd like to return to the Tomahawk missiles, and kind of this. Also, maybe if you could zoom out a little bit and share your thoughts about where things stand Europe wide. Obviously, we have always talked about the fact that this indeed. While it may seem far away from the UK or France, this is still a war being waged on European soil. Tell us, what's your assessment of the missiles and kind of these talks that are going on?
Well, Martha, it's interesting. Good question. I think it's important to remember that a week ago, 2 weeks ago, the thing we were talking about was Russian incursions into NATO airspace, drones over Poland, MiGs over Latvia, drones even over, I think it was Amsterdam. So Russia was really expanding in a way the breadth of its activities with respect to the war in Ukraine. Then we started talking about sending Tomahawks to Ukraine. Now we're not talking about Russian incursions anymore. Sure seems to me like we've effectively traded not selling or providing Tomahawks to the Ukrainians for the Russians no longer violating NATO airspace. That's what it looks like to me. And if it gets these guys back to the negotiating table, good. I would like for it to move a lot faster, obviously. But if this is going to put more pressure on Putin because he sees that Trump is actually willing to do something, at least somewhat related to the Ukraine conflict, and Trump has this win, at least for now, in the return of the hostages in Gaza, which is a major thing, then maybe the dynamic is changing in a positive way here. I will go ahead and remain hopeful against a lot of evidence that we're at least heading in the right direction here. Would like for it to go a little faster, but here we are.
Yeah, I think, to your point, we were talking about these hybrid attacks in Europe, and the Danish Prime Minister at the meeting she hosted with Zelensky and European leaders flat out came out and said that Russia is waging a hybrid war against Europe. And frankly, it seems to me that the only language Putin understands besides his native language is power and force. And certainly the Tomahawk missiles convey that, that we will fight back. And frankly, we should all be appreciative of the fact, in my opinion, that Ukraine is the tip of the spear here. We can all be thankful and grateful to them that they are fending off this aggression that, if we remember, go back to the very beginning, right before Putin ever invaded Ukraine, he was talking about rolling back NATO enlargement. So, yes,
Martha,
Lester.
can I just make this a fun Friday and point out how great it is that we're talking about Tomahawks in the week of Indigenous Peoples Day?
Oh, that's interesting.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we can always count on Lester for his
It's
good
like complete
humor.
non sequitur, but yes.
Lester will have a career someday in stand-up comedy, by the way.
Well, actually, he's pushing for us to be big in K-pop. So you guys stay tuned in Korea. If you're not listening, we're going to be on billboards soon.
Yeah. Get ahead of the curve.
Especially because, you should see us on YouTube first, which takes me to us wrapping up. So on that note, that's a wrap. Thanks to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI team for helping produce today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw on YouTube, so that you can see us on billboards, please rate, review, and subscribe.